Colorado, 1892. Caleb Mercer had been in Silver Creek for less than 4 hours, and that was already 3 hours longer than he wanted to stay. At 34, Caleb had learned there were two kinds of places in the world. There were places where a man could hear himself think. And there were towns. Silver Creek belonged firmly to the second category. He had grown up in a town much like it. He understood how they worked. He understood which families had been feuding since before anyone could remember why. He knew how a man's last name could open the front door of the bank or make the banker suddenly remember another appointment. He knew how rumors moved faster than horses. Once, he had been good at navigating all of it. That had been before his older brother Daniel died. Daniel had left him the Mercer Ranch, 14 miles beyond the South Valley, and another lifetime away from the kind of man Caleb had once expected to become. For 5 years, Caleb had lived mostly among cattle, horses, fence posts, snow, and silence. He preferred them. Cattle did not pretend to like you. A broken fence never lied about being broken. Winter never claimed it had your best interests at heart. Caleb had come to Silver Creek that morning for supplies. He bought flour, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, lamp oil, ammunition, 2 new axe handles, 6 wool blankets, a coil of rope, horseshoe nails, and enough tobacco to last until spring. He loaded everything into the covered wagon behind the general store. Then he climbed onto the driver's bench and reached for the reins. That was when he heard something move behind him. Not the shifting of flour sacks, not the settling of blankets. A person. Caleb froze. Something scraped softly against the wooden side of the wagon. He set the reins down. Then he climbed off. He walked around to the back, rested one hand near the revolver at his hip, and pulled open the canvas flap. A young woman was sitting between 2 flour sacks and a stack of blankets. She stared at him. Caleb stared back. She looked about 25. Dark brown hair had come loose from a careful arrangement of pins, leaving curls around her cheeks. Her eyes were hazel, almost green in the afternoon light, and they were moving quickly over Caleb's face, assessing him, measuring him, trying to decide whether being discovered by this particular stranger was a disaster or a possibility. She wore a pale blue dress that had probably looked elegant several hours earlier. Now the hem was streaked with mud. One sleeve was torn near the wrist. Her cream-colored button shoes were dusty. She held a small leather traveling bag against her chest with both hands. Caleb noticed one more thing. She was breathing too hard for someone who had merely climbed into a wagon. She had been running. Before he could speak, the sound of horses came from Main Street. Several horses, moving slowly, deliberately. The kind of pace men used when they were searching every doorway and every wagon, rather than racing toward a known destination. The woman's face changed. She leaned toward Caleb. "Please." The word barely reached him. The horses were getting closer. She swallowed. Then she whispered, "Pretend I'm your wife until we're out of town." Caleb looked at the stranger hiding among his winter supplies. He did not know her name. He did not know what she had done. He did not know who was looking for her. He knew only that she was frightened, and that frightened people could be victims or criminals with equal conviction. Who are they? No time. Did you steal something? No. Kill anyone? Her eyes widened. No. Are they lawmen? No. That answer came immediately. Caleb heard hoofbeats turning into the street behind the store. He made his decision. "Lie flat." She blinked. "Now!" She dropped behind the flour sacks. Caleb pulled 2 blankets over her. "Do not move unless I tell you." She nodded beneath the wool. Caleb closed the canvas. He returned to the front of the wagon. He climbed up. He picked up the reins. 3 riders came around the corner. Caleb recognized them before they reached him. Everybody within 50 miles of Silver Creek knew Victor Hale's men. Victor Hale was 57 years old and owned more land than some counties. He owned cattle. He owned warehouses. He owned notes on farms. He owned shares in the bank. He owned half the commercial buildings along Main Street. And according to people who said it quietly, he owned several elected officials as well. His riders were not especially impressive men individually. Together, however, they carried themselves with the confidence of people who understood that another man's money would protect them from most consequences. The lead rider stopped beside Caleb's wagon. "Afternoon?" "Afternoon. You Mercer?" Caleb looked at him. "You already know I am." The rider smiled without humor. "You come in from the south?" "This morning." "You see a woman on the road?" Caleb waited. The rider continued. "Mid-20s, dark hair, blue dress." Caleb considered the question for exactly 1 second. He did not know why the woman was hiding. He did not know whether helping her was right. But until he knew otherwise, he saw no reason to deliver a frightened stranger to men who worked for Victor Hale. "My wife's in the back," Caleb said. "She got sick on the ride into town." The rider looked toward the canvas. Caleb did not. "You married Mercer?" "Apparently." The rider's eyes narrowed. Caleb kept his expression flat. Then the canvas behind him moved. The young woman appeared. Caleb almost turned around. Almost. Instead, he watched the rider. She leaned through the opening with sleepy irritation on her face. It was an impressive transformation. Her hair was more disordered now. Her cheeks had taken on a warm flush. She looked annoyed rather than terrified. "Caleb." She said his name as though she had been saying it every day for years. "Are we leaving or not?" Caleb glanced back at her. "In a minute, Claire." He had chosen the first woman's name that came to mind. The stranger did not hesitate. She rolled her eyes. "I've been hearing that for 20 minutes. The rider studied her. Then his gaze dropped to her feet. Those cream shoes did not look like anything a rancher's wife would choose for a supply run. "Those are fancy shoes for a woman riding 14 miles in a wagon." Caleb flicked the reins. The horses started forward. She was in town for church. It was Sunday. At least Caleb thought it was. He had stopped paying much attention to Sundays since living alone. The rider looked back at Silver Creek's church steeple. Caleb decided not to wait for further questions. The wagon rolled past. The stranger lowered the flap. 30 seconds later, Caleb heard hoofbeats behind them. They were following, not charging, following. Caleb preferred a chase. A chase usually meant emotion had taken over. Following meant someone was thinking. He turned the wagon sharply beside Miller's Feed and Supply. Instead of taking the south road, he entered an alley behind the blacksmith shop. A shopkeeper shouted at him. Caleb ignored the man. The wagon bounced through a drainage ditch and emerged on the old mining road west of town. Nobody used that road anymore unless they had good reason. The mines had closed 7 years earlier. Parts of the road had washed away. What remained wound through cottonwoods before meeting the southern foothills. Caleb knew every mile of it. Victor Hale's men probably did not. He pushed the horses harder. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The hoofbeats faded. Caleb did not slow down for another half hour. Finally, the canvas shifted. The woman climbed forward and sat beside him. She still held the leather bag. Her cream shoes were now ruined beyond repair. Caleb looked at them. "So much for church." She looked down. "I could start attending barefoot." Silver Creek would talk. "I believe Silver Creek already has plenty to talk about." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. She looked behind them. "They'll expect you to take the main valley road." "That's why I didn't." "Where does this one lead?" "My ranch, eventually." "Eventually?" "It adds about 6 miles and crosses Black Pine Ridge." She looked at the mountains. October had painted the aspens gold. Above them, the Colorado sky was a hard, brilliant blue. Snow already covered the highest peaks. Winter was waiting. The young woman placed her bag between her boots. "I owe you an explanation." "Yes." She waited for him to ask another question. He did not. After several seconds, she said, "My name really is Claire." Caleb glanced at her. She smiled faintly. "Claire Bennett. Convenient. I was wondering whether I should be offended that I looked like a Claire. You looked like someone who needed a name. That is not better. It wasn't meant to be." She looked ahead again. "My mother owned a dressmaking shop in Silver Creek." Caleb knew the place. Bennett Dress and Alterations, a narrow storefront 3 doors from the hotel. He remembered seeing an older woman through the window, bent over a sewing machine. "My mother died in April," Claire said. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She folded her hands. "After she died, I found debts I didn't know existed. A lot of them." Victor Hale held most of the notes. Caleb understood immediately that the story was going somewhere ugly. Hale doesn't lend money because he's generous. My mother believed he was helping her. Most people do at first. Claire looked at him. "You know him?" "I know of him." "That's probably better." She took a breath. "The wedding was supposed to be today." Caleb turned his head. She met his eyes. "My wedding." "To Hale?" "Yes." Caleb looked at the road again. "He's 32 years older than you." 32 years and 6 months, according to him. "He enjoys precision when it benefits him." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Why?" "He said marrying him would settle my mother's debts." Caleb said nothing. Claire continued. "At first I thought my mother had simply borrowed too much. Business was slow 2 winters ago. She got sick. Then the roof on the shop needed replacing. Hale offered credit, and the interest was not what she was told." Caleb glanced at her. "I found the real notes 2 weeks ago." She stared at the mountains as she spoke. "Hale told my mother one rate. The papers used another. There were penalties for missed payments and charges for extending the loan and fees for reviewing those extensions. Every time she paid him, she somehow owed more." "That's not lending." "No." "It's a trap." "Yes." Her voice became quieter. "I think it was always supposed to be one." Caleb considered that. "What does he want?" "Land." That made more sense. Claire continued. "My grandfather owned 12 acres south of town. Not much compared with Hale's holdings. My mother inherited it. I inherited it from her." "What is on it?" "Silver Creek." Caleb looked at her. "The actual creek?" She nodded. "About half a mile of it. Hale owns the property upstream and most of the land downstream, but my family's parcel divides 2 of his grazing sections." Caleb understood. "Water." "Water and something else." "What?" "The Denver and Western surveyors came through in June." Caleb had heard rumors about a new rail spur. Claire continued. "One possible route crosses the south end of my land. Hale has been buying property quietly for 3 years. If the railroad chooses that route, he controls the water, stop the cattle loading site, and almost every usable acre around it. And your parcel sits in the middle." "Yes." Caleb let out a slow breath. "Hale didn't accidentally lend money to your mother." "No." "He wanted the land." Claire nodded. "And when she died, he told me the debt transferred to the estate. He said if I sold the land, he would take it. If I refused, he would foreclose. Then he offered another solution. Marriage." "Marriage?" Caleb's hands tightened around the reins. "Why not simply foreclose?" "Because my grandfather's deed has restrictions." "What kind?" "I don't fully understand them. Something about water access and family ownership. Hale said marriage would make everything cleaner." Caleb thought of Daniel. His brother had been a lawyer in Denver before deciding he hated courtrooms and wanted cattle instead. Daniel had carried law books west in the same wagon that later carried feed and fence posts. For years, Caleb had listened to him talk about deeds, easements, mineral rights, liens, water rights, probate, and contracts. Caleb had ignored much of it. Now he wished he had listened more carefully. Debt doesn't automatically give Hale ownership of inherited land. he said. Claire turned toward him. Are you sure? Not about the details. Her hope faded slightly. My brother practiced law. That brought it back. He said a creditor generally needs a legitimate claim against the estate. If specific property is collateral, that has to be supported by the documents. Hale can't simply announce that your land belongs to him because your mother owed him money. Unless everyone believes him. That's the problem. Claire gave a humorless laugh. In Silver Creek, what Victor Hale says has a remarkable habit of becoming legal. Local legal and actually legal are not always the same thing. She watched him. You sound like your brother. You never met my brother. No, but I already like him. Caleb did smile then. It disappeared quickly. Do you have the notes? No. Copies? No. Anything? Claire touched the leather bag between her feet. I took 2 papers from my mother's desk. What papers? I don't know if they matter. Keep them safe, anyway. She nodded. The wagon continued through the afternoon. For a while, neither spoke. The silence did not feel uncomfortable. That surprised Caleb. Most people hurried to fill silence because they were frightened of what might live inside it. Claire appeared willing to let it exist. Eventually, she told him the rest. Victor Hale had approached her 3 weeks after her mother's funeral. He had been kind at first. He brought flowers. He offered help with the shop. He told her not to worry about the debt until she was ready. Then, gradually, the kindness changed shape. Payments were demanded. Deadlines appeared. Men began visiting the shop. Customers became uncomfortable. A supplier suddenly refused Claire credit. The bank declined a small loan despite her mother's business having operated for 18 years. Then Hale proposed marriage. He presented it as rescue. Claire had refused. The following morning, a notice appeared on the shop door. Her mother's estate was in default. She had consulted a local attorney. The attorney listened to her and then advised her to accept Hale's proposal. Did he explain why? He said fighting Victor Hale would cost more than the land was worth. That wasn't your question. I know. Caleb looked at her. When did you decide to run? This morning. This morning, I kept believing I would think of another solution. And when you didn't, I put on the dress Sarah made for the ceremony. Sarah Collins, my mother's closest friend. Claire looked down at the mud on her skirt. She was helping me dress. Then she looked at me in the mirror and asked if I wanted to marry him. I assume you said no? I couldn't say anything. Claire's voice trembled for the first time. She took out the last pin in my hair. Then she said, "Your mother raised you better than to confuse surrender with duty." Caleb was quiet. So I left through the back door and climbed into my wagon. You were loading blankets. That seemed trustworthy. No, but the canvas was open. Caleb shook his head. You had no plan. I had an excellent plan, which was leave. That is half a plan. It was a very successful half. Caleb looked back toward the road. Until Hale finds out where you went. Claire's expression sobered. Yes. The temperature dropped as they climbed. Clouds were building over the northern peaks. Caleb studied them. He did not like what he saw. How far to the ranch? Claire asked. Normally 3 hours. And today? Depends on that storm. She followed his gaze. Snow? Worse if the wind comes with it. Caleb pushed the horses faster. By sunset, the sky had disappeared behind gray. The first snowflakes came sideways. 20 minutes later, the mountains seemed to vanish. Caleb changed plans. We're not making the ranch. Claire turned toward him. What are we doing? Line cabin. Is that good? It's better than dying on a mountain. An encouraging distinction. The storm hit hard. Caleb could barely see the road. He followed landmarks from memory. A split pine. A black rock wall. The shallow bend where spring runoff had cut through the trail. At last he saw the dark shape of the cabin. It was a one-room stone structure his brother had built for summer grazing. There was a lean-to for horses and a fireplace inside. More importantly, Caleb stacked firewood there every September. Daniel had taught him that. "You prepare for the winter you're certain won't come," his brother used to say. "That is usually the one that finds you." They secured the horses. Caleb covered the wagon. Claire carried food while he brought in wood. Within 30 minutes, a fire was burning. Snow hammered the roof. Claire removed her wet shoes and placed them near the hearth. Caleb looked at them. "I think they're dead." She glanced down. "They died bravely. They never had a chance. They were made for a church. That explains it." Claire laughed softly. It was the first time Caleb had heard the sound. It changed her entire face. He looked away sooner than necessary. They ate salt pork biscuits cooked in a skillet and beans Caleb had brought from town. Claire handled the cooking without asking permission. She moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making do with what was available. When they finished, she cleaned the pan. Caleb sat near the fire, repairing a strap from the wagon harness. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Do what?" "Work. I'm eating your food. That doesn't put you in my employment." "No, but sitting around while you do everything would make me unpleasant company." He looked at her. "You don't seem concerned about being pleasant company." "Good. Then we've established trust." Caleb shook his head. Outside, the wind screamed across the ridge. Claire became quiet. After a while, she said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not asking everything at once." Caleb set the harness strap aside. "You were telling me, at my speed." "Yes." She looked into the fire. "My mother used to say the right person knows which question to ask and when to ask it." "What was the right question?" Claire smiled faintly. "She never told me." "Not useful advice. I said that once. She said I would understand when I needed to." Caleb considered the fire. Then he asked, "Did you eat breakfast?" Claire looked at him. "No." "Lunch?" "No." "That probably should have been my first question." Her mouth curved. "It would have been the wrong question in Silver Creek." "And now?" "Now it might be the right one." Caleb nodded. For some reason, that answer stayed with him long after she went to sleep. He gave Claire the narrow cot. He slept near the door, with his coat rolled beneath his head. During the night, Caleb woke to the sound of wind. For a moment, he forgot she was there. Then the fire shifted throwing light across the cabin. Claire was awake. She sat on the cot, holding something in her hands. A small Bible. She was not reading. She was simply holding it. "Your mother's?" Caleb asked. Claire looked up. "Yes." He expected her to explain. She did not. He understood. "My brother's hat is still hanging beside the back door at the ranch." Claire watched him. 5 years. 5 years. "Do you ever wear it?" "No." "Do you ever move it?" "No." She nodded. Neither said anything else. Some conversations ended because nothing remained to say. Others ended because both people understood enough. By morning, the storm had passed. The world was white. They reached the Mercer Ranch just after noon. Claire climbed down from the wagon. Then she stopped. The house stood on a rise overlooking the valley. It was larger than she expected. 2 stories. A wide porch, stone chimney, barn to the east, corrals beyond it. Cottonwoods followed the creek behind the house. The garden had been covered with straw and manure for the winter. Fence lines ran toward the hills. "You live here alone?" Caleb began unloading. "Yes." Claire looked at the windows. They were clean. The porch had been swept. A stack of split firewood stood under cover. Nothing was neglected. Yet the place carried the stillness of a house waiting for something. "You built it?" "My brother did most of it." Claire looked toward him. "I'm sorry. 5 years ago." It was not exactly an answer to what she had said. She seemed to understand anyway. Inside the house was clean and practical. Everything had a place. Boots by the door, coats on pegs, cooking pans above the stove, tools arranged carefully. The table was large enough for 6 people. Only one chair showed regular use. Caleb led Claire upstairs. "You can use Daniel's room." He opened the door. The room had been preserved rather than abandoned. A bed, a dresser, books on a shelf, a washstand, curtains faded by years of sunlight. Claire stepped inside carefully. Caleb expected questions. She asked none. Instead, she put her leather bag on the chair. "I'll pay for my keep." "No, then I'll work." "You don't have to. I'm not staying in someone's home for months without contributing." "Months?" Claire turned toward the window. "The pass." Caleb followed her gaze. More clouds were gathering over the peaks. Black Pine Pass usually remained open until mid-November. Sometimes later, sometimes not. "If winter closes early," he said, "it may not open until April." "Then I'll work until April." "The ranch functions with one person." Claire looked at him. "Does it?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. She glanced around Daniel's untouched room, then toward the quiet hallway. "I mean the ranch." "So do I." Claire held his gaze. "It might function better with 2. Caleb almost argued. Then he remembered the injured mare in the east stall. "Know anything about horses?" "My grandfather raised them." Caleb nodded toward the window. "There's a chestnut mare in the east stall. Strained her front leg last week. I'll look at her." "You just got here." "Tomorrow morning." "Fine." Claire unpacked after he left. Her entire life had been reduced to what fit inside a leather bag. One change of clothes, her mother's Bible, a sewing kit, a hairbrush, a small silver locket, and 2 documents she had taken from the hidden drawer of her mother's writing desk. One was a letter. The other was a page torn from an account ledger. Claire had not understood why her mother had kept them. She had taken them simply because Victor Hale's name appeared on both. Outside, snow began falling again. By November 5th, Black Pine Pass was closed. Claire Bennett was at the Mercer Ranch for the winter. There was nothing easy or romantic about the arrangement at first. Winter on a Colorado cattle ranch was work. Constant work. The cattle had to be fed. Ice had to be broken from the water troughs. Wood had to be cut. Snow had to be cleared. Harnesses had to be repaired. Animals had to be checked before sunrise and after dark. Claire never complained. The first morning she examined the mare. Caleb watched from outside the stall. Claire ran her hands down the animal's leg with confidence. "She's healing." "You sure swelling is down?" "I know that." "Then why did you ask?" Caleb looked at her. Claire smiled. "She needs light movement, not complete rest." "That's what I've been doing." "Then you're less hopeless than you look." He stared at her. She turned back to the horse. By December, the mare was sound. Claire repaired things, not because Caleb asked, because she noticed them. A tear in the kitchen curtain disappeared. A loose porch board stopped moving. A split in the harness leather was stitched. A gap beneath the pantry window was packed against the wind. A missing button appeared on Caleb's winter coat. He found it one morning and looked at it for an unreasonable amount of time. Claire began baking bread twice a week. Caleb began bringing in extra wood before she asked. They developed a rhythm. When ranch work separated them, they left notes on the kitchen table. "Need another cord of wood before February. The mare's leg looks good. I moved the heifers to the south field. There is stew on the stove. Your left glove has a hole." "I know. Then stop wearing it until I repair it." "No." That particular exchange lasted 4 days. On the 5th morning, Caleb found his glove missing. It reappeared after supper with new leather across the palm. He put it on. Claire watched him. "Anything to say?" "It fits, Caleb. Thank you. You're welcome." Christmas came quietly. Claire found pine branches near the creek and arranged them above the fireplace. Caleb claimed this served no practical purpose. She ignored him. On Christmas Eve, she made biscuits with the last jar of blackberry preserves Daniel had canned 6 years earlier. Caleb found the jar in the cellar and stared at it.
I didn't know these were still here.
Claire stopped. We don't have to open it. Caleb held the jar. Daniel's handwriting was on the lid. August 1886. Caleb ran his thumb over the faded ink. Then he handed it to her. Open it. They ate the preserves at the kitchen table. For the first time in 5 years, Caleb told someone about his brother's death. Daniel had been thrown from a horse during a thunderstorm. The injury itself might not have killed him. The ranch was too far from the doctor. By the time Caleb reached town and returned, Daniel was gone. I wasn't here, Caleb said. Claire sat opposite him.
I had gone for help.
I know. I should have stayed. Would staying have saved him? Caleb did not answer. Caleb. No. Then you didn't leave him. You went to help him. Caleb looked at the table. 5 years was a long time to carry one version of a memory. Sometimes all it took to change its weight was another person saying it aloud differently. In January, the cold became brutal. One morning, Caleb found Claire standing near the creek with a rope. What happened? Calf went through the ice. Caleb ran. A young calf had broken through a thin section near the bank. Only its head and front shoulders remained above water. Caleb tied the rope around his waist. Claire grabbed his arm. No. It'll freeze. So will you. I can reach it. You weigh more than the ice wants. Thank you. You know what I mean. They worked together. Claire anchored the rope around a cottonwood. Caleb crawled across the ice. The surface cracked beneath him twice. Claire's face went white. Caleb. I'm fine. That sound was not fine. He reached the calf. The ice broke again. Caleb dropped waist deep into water. The cold hit like a hammer. Claire did not scream. She pulled. Caleb shoved the calf upward while Claire hauled the rope. Together they dragged the animal onto solid ground. Then Claire pulled Caleb out. He could barely feel his hands. Back at the house, she ordered him out of his wet clothes with the authority of an army commander. He stared at her. Turn around. She turned. He changed. She wrapped him in blankets and put him near the stove. Then she handed him hot coffee. You are an idiot. The calf is alive. You are still an idiot. Both things can be true. Claire sat across from him. Her hands were shaking. Caleb noticed. You were scared. No. Claire? She looked at him angrily. Yes. The answer changed the room. Caleb lowered his coffee. I wasn't trying to scare you. I know. Then why are you angry? Because that doesn't make being scared disappear. He did not know what to say. Claire stood. She walked to the stove. Caleb watched her. That evening, she left no note on the table. The next morning, there was one. Do not fall through any more ice. Caleb wrote beneath it. I'll put it on the schedule, Claire added another line. That was not funny. Caleb stared at the note, then wrote, a little funny. When Claire found it, he heard her laugh from the kitchen. By then, the ranch did run better with two. Not because Claire worked harder than Caleb, not because she transformed the place. She did something more subtle. Her presence changed what the work meant. Before Claire, Caleb maintained the ranch because maintenance was necessary. The roof had to remain sound. The cattle had to survive. The fences had to stand. The garden had to be planted because food had to grow. Now he found himself thinking about spring. Not merely surviving until it, he found himself wondering what Claire would plant in the garden. He repaired the porch steps more carefully because she used them. He began making a second cup of coffee without thinking. He listened for her footsteps upstairs. He knew which floorboard creaked beneath her bedroom door. He knew she hummed while sewing. He knew she hated overcooked potatoes. He knew she read her mother's Bible when she missed her. He knew she still woke from nightmares sometimes. He never asked what happened in them. One morning, Claire brought the 2 papers from her bag downstairs. "I think we should look at these." Caleb cleared the table. The first was a letter from Victor Hale to a banker in Denver. It had been written nearly 4 years earlier. Caleb read it twice, then a third time. Claire watched him. "What?" "This matters." "How much?" "A lot." The letter discussed loans being made to several Silver Creek property owners. It referred to public interest rates and actual collection rates. More importantly, it contained a sentence about obtaining control of parcels along the proposed railroad corridor before survey information became public. Claire's mother's name appeared in the margin. The second document was a ledger page. It listed payments made by Margaret Bennett. Next to several payments were numbers that did not match the loan balance Claire had been shown after her mother's death. Caleb leaned back. Daniel would know exactly what to do with this. But Daniel isn't here. No. Claire waited. Caleb looked at the papers. But his law books are. They spent 3 nights reading. Most of the language was miserable. Claire announced that lawyers had invented words specifically to make ordinary people regret learning to read. Caleb agreed. Eventually, they found what mattered. If Hale had deliberately misrepresented terms, manipulated the accounting, or used fraudulent debt to acquire property, the issue extended beyond an ordinary private loan dispute. The railroad reference made the letter even more important. "We need someone outside Silver Creek," Claire said. "Yes. Denver, or the federal marshal's office." "How do we get it there?" The pass was closed. But ranchers moved through the lower valley when weather allowed. 3 days later, Caleb rode to the Henderson spread. Tom Henderson agreed to carry a sealed copy east when his brother made the winter mail run. Claire wrote to Sarah Collins in Silver Creek. She asked Sarah to search the dress shop for additional records. The letter left the valley in late January. Then they waited. Waiting was difficult. Ranch work helped. So did routine. Some evenings, Claire read aloud from newspapers Caleb had saved. Other nights, they played cards. Claire cheated badly. Caleb accused her of cheating. She informed him that a person could not cheat badly and still win. He said that was exactly what a cheater would say. By February, they had created a life without discussing whether that was what they were doing. Then Victor Hale came to the ranch. 6 riders appeared shortly before noon. Caleb was in the barn. He heard horses. Not 1, not 2, several. He stepped outside. Victor Hale sat at the center of the group. At 57, he still carried the remains of a physically powerful man, but he no longer needed size to intimidate people. Money had been doing that work for decades. His coat was expensive. His horse was expensive. His saddle was expensive. Even the silence around him seemed purchased. Caleb walked into the yard. "Hale?" "Mercer." Neither man offered more. Hale looked toward the house. "I believe you have something belonging to me." Caleb's expression did not change. "Lost cattle, a woman." The front door opened. Claire stepped onto the porch. For months, Caleb had known her in work dresses, wool skirts, aprons, boots, and old coats. Now she stood with her hair tied back, wearing a dark green dress she had altered from one of her mother's. She looked directly at Victor Hale. Hale smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed the ending had already been decided. "Claire?" She did not answer. "Come down." She remained on the porch. Hale's smile faded. "Your mother's debts remain unresolved." "You created those debts." "I extended assistance to your mother when no one else would." "You lied to her." "Careful." Claire's hands tightened at her sides. Caleb stepped forward. Hale looked at him. "This doesn't concern you. You're standing on my property. This is a contractual matter." "Then bring a court order." Hale's eyes hardened. "Do you understand who you're interfering with?" Caleb looked around the ranch. "Man on a horse, from what I can tell." One rider shifted uncomfortably. Hale ignored it. "Claire agreed to marry me." Claire spoke from the porch. "No, I agreed not to fight you because you convinced me fighting was impossible. You signed an agreement under threat of losing my mother's property. That property is security for legitimate debt. Then show the original loan documents." Hale went still. Claire continued. "Show the documents with my mother's signature acknowledging the interest rates you actually charged. You're repeating words you don't understand." "I understand enough." Hale looked at Caleb. "You filled her head with foolishness." Caleb shook his head. "She arrived with her own head." Claire almost smiled. Hale's anger became visible. "Mercer, you have no standing here." "I have standing in anything that happens in my yard." "You're one man." Before Caleb could answer, another voice came from the road. "No, he isn't." Everyone turned. Tom Henderson sat on horseback near the gate. Behind him were his brother Jacob and two ranchers from the northern valley. They had seen Hale's riders moving south. 6 armed men traveling together in February tended to attract attention. Hale looked at them, then back at Caleb. His riders began to look less comfortable. Claire came down the porch steps. Caleb moved slightly, positioning himself between her and Hale. She noticed. So did Hale. "Claire," Hale said, his voice softer now. "You're making this harder than necessary." She stopped beside Caleb. "No." "What? You are." Hale's face changed. Claire reached into her dress pocket. She unfolded a paper. Not the original. A copy. "You were right about one thing," she said. "I didn't take my mother's loan papers." Hale's expression remained controlled. "But I took your letter to Franklin Bank in Denver." The control cracked. Only slightly. "Enough." Claire continued. "The letter where you explained the rates your agents should quote to borrowers and the rates they should actually collect." Hale's eyes moved to the paper. "The one where you mention acquiring property along the railroad corridor before the route became public." One of Hale's riders looked at him. Claire noticed. "So did Sarah Collins." Hale's face became pale beneath the winter sun. Claire went on. "She found my mother's duplicate account books." Hale said nothing. "They show every payment." Still nothing. "Copies are already on their way to the United States Marshal's office." That was not entirely true. They hoped the papers had reached the Marshal. But Hale did not know that. "And Sarah gave another copy to a lawyer in Denver," Claire said. That part was true. Tom Henderson had brought confirmation that morning. Hale stared at her. Claire's voice shook now, only a little. Caleb heard it. He also saw that she remained standing. "The original deed to my grandfather's land is with the county clerk," she said. "The debt was never secured against that parcel. Your own letter proves you were trying to obtain it before my mother even needed money." Hale looked at Caleb. Caleb did not move. Hale looked at the 4 men by the road, then at his own riders. Authority depended on agreement. For years, people had behaved as though Victor Hale's power was a natural fact, like winter or gravity. Now in one snow-covered ranch yard, several men were beginning to understand that it was not. One of Hale's riders shifted his horse away. Another looked toward the road. Hale saw it. "This isn't finished," Caleb answered. "Yes, it is." Hale stared at Claire. "You think these men will protect you forever?" Claire looked directly at him. "No." She paused. "I think I learned I can protect myself." Hale's jaw tightened. Claire folded the paper. "And I learned I don't have to do it alone." Hale turned his horse. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then one rider followed him. Then another. Soon all 6 were riding north, not in formation anymore, just men, leaving. The yard became quiet. Tom Henderson called from the road. "Everything good, Mercer?" Caleb nodded. "Good enough." Tom tipped his hat toward Claire. "Ma'am?" "Thank you, Tom." "We didn't do much." Claire looked at the road where Hale had disappeared. "You came." Tom considered that. Sometimes that's the part that matters. Then the 4 ranchers rode away. Claire remained in the yard. Her hands began shaking. Caleb saw it. "Hale will go to the marshal," she said. "Probably." "Before the marshal comes to him." "Probably." "Will the evidence hold?" Caleb looked at her. "It'll hold." "How do you know?" "Because it's true." Claire exhaled. Caleb added, "And because Hale looked scared." That made her laugh. A strange laugh, half relief, half exhaustion. Then she began to cry. Caleb froze. Claire covered her face. "I hate this." "What?" "Crying after what?" "After I needed to be brave." Caleb stood awkwardly for a moment. Then he stepped closer. "You were brave." "I was terrified." "Those can happen at the same time." Claire lowered her hands. Caleb realized he had repeated something Daniel used to tell him. He reached out, not certain whether he should. Claire made the decision for him. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. Caleb's arms went around her. Carefully at first, then firmly. They stood in the snow. Neither spoke. Eventually, Claire stepped back. Caleb cleared his throat. "Cattle need checking." Claire laughed through the last of her tears. "Of course they do. They don't respect major emotional events." "I've noticed." He walked toward the barn. Halfway there, Claire called after him. "Caleb?" He turned. "Thank you." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're welcome." That evening, the house felt different. The danger had not disappeared completely. There would be investigations, lawyers, paperwork, questions, possibly retaliation. But the immediate threat had passed. Claire sat at the kitchen table holding her mother's Bible. Caleb sat opposite her. The fire burned low. "The pass opens in April," he said. Claire looked up. "Usually." "I can take you wherever you want when it does." She did not answer. "The shop in Silver Creek may still be yours. Maybe. Your land should be clear once the claim is reviewed. Probably. You could sell it, I could, or keep it." "Yes." Caleb looked down at his hands. "You could go to Denver." Claire watched him. "Is that what you're planning?" "What? Taking me to Denver?" "If that's where you want to go." "And then?" Caleb stared at the table. "I come back." "Here?" "Yes." "Alone?" He did not answer. Claire waited. Caleb could stare down 6 armed riders without blinking. This was worse. He tried again. "I can take you anywhere." Claire remained silent. He looked at her. "I just don't know how I'm supposed to come back to this house if you're not in it." The room became completely still. Caleb continued before courage abandoned him. "I've tried to figure out when that happened." "When what happened?" "When this stopped being you staying here until spring." Claire's eyes filled. Caleb shook his head. "I'm doing this badly." "No." "I had better words earlier." "Where?" "In the barn." "You should have brought the barn," he laughed once. Claire smiled. Then she looked toward the hallway. "I repaired the curtains in Daniel's room." "I know." "And the porch railing." "I know." "The harness." "I know." "I've been making bread in your kitchen." "I noticed." "I moved my mother's Bible to the shelf beside Daniel's law books." Caleb nodded. "I've been leaving notes on your table for 4 months." "I know." Claire's voice softened. "Caleb, I live here." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "I live here." This time the words were not about geography. They were a decision. Caleb reached across the table. He placed his hand over hers. Claire turned her hand and laced her fingers through his. "You sure?" he asked. Claire smiled. "About the ranch? About me?" "No." Caleb blinked. Claire squeezed his hand. "I'm sure about the man who hid a stranger under winter blankets without knowing whether she deserved it. I'm sure about the man who drove 6 miles out of his way because 3 riders made me afraid. I'm sure about the man who left his brother's room untouched for 5 years because love sometimes looks like not knowing how to change something." Caleb said nothing. "I'm sure about the man who risks freezing to death for stupid calves. That part feels unnecessary. It is, unfortunately, part of the evidence." Caleb smiled. Claire continued. "And I'm sure this house feels like home." He tightened his hand around hers. "So yes." Caleb leaned closer. Claire met him halfway. Their first kiss was quiet. No audience, no dramatic music, no declaration. Just 2 people at a kitchen table while winter pressed against the windows. When they separated, Claire rested her forehead against his. "I have another question." "What?" "If we marry, do I have to keep pretending to be your wife?" Caleb laughed. It surprised both of them. "No." "Good." "Claire, yes. I don't think I've pretended anything since the moment I found you in that wagon." Her smile faded into something softer. "I know." In March, word reached the valley that Victor Hale had left Colorado. The investigation had expanded beyond Claire's case. Several families came forward with similar loan documents. A farmer produced letters. A widow produced receipts. A former bank clerk agreed to testify. Once one person spoke, others discovered that Hale's power had always depended partly on everyone believing they stood alone. By April, Claire's family parcel had been formally separated from her mother's unsecured business debts. The 12 acres remained hers. She kept them. Sarah Collins reopened the dress shop temporarily and sent Claire a letter asking what she intended to do with it. Claire wrote back, "Sell the building, keep the land." Sarah replied with only 4 words, "Your mother would approve." Black Pine Pass opened in the 3rd week of April. Snowmelt filled the creek. Grass pushed through the brown earth. The aspens showed their first pale leaves. Claire stood in the Mercer garden with her hands on her hips. "Potatoes." Caleb leaned against the fence. "We planted potatoes last year. Badly. They grew. They survived. Same result. No." Claire pointed toward another bed. "Carrots there. Beans along the south fence. Onions near the house." Caleb watched her. "You have strong opinions. Your ranch has been suffering from weak ones." "My brother planned that garden." Claire stopped. Caleb smiled. "He would have liked you." Her expression softened. "How do you know?" "Because you both tell me what I'm doing wrong." Claire laughed. They married in June. Claire refused an elaborate wedding. After escaping one ceremony, she had no interest in turning another into a public spectacle. Sarah made her dress. Cream-colored, simple, beautiful. Practical enough, Claire insisted that she could wear the boots she already owned beneath it. Caleb wore Daniel's hat. It was the first time he had taken it from the peg in 5 years. He stood in front of the mirror that morning holding it. For several minutes he could not put it on. Then Claire appeared in the doorway. She did not ask what was wrong, she simply walked over. She touched the brim. "He'd want you to wear it." Caleb looked at her. "I think so." "So do I." She placed the hat on his head. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. Then they went downstairs. They returned to Silver Creek in the same wagon Claire had hidden inside 8 months earlier. As they reached town, she looked toward the canvas-covered back. "Do you remember what you said when those men asked who I was?" "My wife." "You sounded annoyed." I was trying to be convincing. You were very convincing. You climbed into my wagon without permission. I was under stress. You also insulted my plan. You did not have one. I had a road. That is not a plan. Caleb looked at her. Claire smiled. He shook his head. The church was full. Tom Henderson and his family came from the valley. The northern ranchers came. Sarah sat in the front row crying before Claire even entered. The dress shop customers came. Several families whose properties had been caught in Hale's schemes came as well. Claire walked down the aisle. Caleb watched her. He remembered a frightened woman between sacks of flour, mud on a blue dress, a leather bag clutched against her chest. Pretend I'm your wife until we're out of town. At the time, it had been a lie intended to last perhaps 20 minutes, long enough to get past 3 riders, long enough to reach the edge of Silver Creek. That was all. Neither of them had understood what small decisions could become. Caleb had chosen not to hand her over. He had chosen the wrong road. He had chosen not to ask questions until she wanted to answer them. He had chosen to give her his brother's room. Claire had chosen to work, to repair a curtain, to save a letter, to write notes, to stay. A life had grown in the spaces between those choices. The vows were simple. When the minister asked Caleb whether he took Claire as his wife, Sarah made a small sound from the front row. Claire glanced at her. Sarah covered her mouth. Caleb answered, "I do." Then it was Claire's turn. She looked at him. For 1 second, mischief appeared in her eyes. Caleb knew immediately what she was thinking. Claire said, "I do." The church laughed. The minister looked confused. Caleb smiled. Afterward, outside in the Colorado sunshine, Sarah found Claire near the wagon. "Your mother would have loved this." Claire looked toward Caleb. He was talking with Tom near the church steps. "She would have told me to run sooner." Sarah laughed. "Probably." "She would have liked him. Definitely." Claire watched Caleb. "He doesn't say much." "Neither did your mother when something mattered." Claire looked at Sarah. Sarah reached for her hand. "She would have been proud of you." Claire's eyes filled. She nodded. Across the churchyard, Caleb saw her expression. He excused himself from Tom and walked over. "You all right?" Claire smiled. "Yes." He held out his hand. She took it. Later that afternoon, they left Silver Creek. Not because Claire was escaping. Not because riders were behind them. Not because anyone was forcing her somewhere she did not want to go. She sat beside Caleb on the driver's bench. Her wedding dress was covered by a traveling coat. Daniel's hat shaded Caleb's eyes. The mowed south stretched ahead. When they passed the place where the old mining road turned west, Claire pointed. "That way." "No. It's shorter." "It is absolutely not shorter." It was memorable. "We nearly froze, but we didn't." Caleb looked at her. Claire leaned against his shoulder. "No," he said. "We're taking the proper road home." Home. Claire smiled at the word. The wagon continued south. Behind them, Silver Creek became smaller. Ahead, the mountains opened. The Mercer Ranch waited beyond the valley. The garden had been planted. The mare was healthy. The cattle were on spring grass. 2 coffee cups sat beside the kitchen stove, notes still collected on the table. The chair opposite Caleb's was no longer empty, and Daniel's room was no longer a room preserved for someone who would never return. It belonged to the woman who had repaired its curtains and filled its dresser and placed her mother's Bible beside Daniel's law books. That evening, Claire stood on the porch while Caleb put away the wagon. The sunset turned the mountains orange. He walked toward the house. She watched him come. 8 months earlier, she had hidden behind his flour sacks and asked a stranger for one impossible favor. "Pretend I am your wife," he had agreed before he knew her name. What she did not understand then was that Caleb Mercer was not particularly good at pretending. He had not pretended when he protected her. He had not pretended when he listened. He had not pretended when he left coffee for her before sunrise. He had not pretended when he stood between her and Victor Hale. He had not pretended when he told her he could take her anywhere but did not know how to return without her. And Claire had not pretended when she said she lived there. The lie that got her out of Silver Creek had become the most truthful thing in either of their lives. Some lives change because of enormous decisions. Most do not. Most change through smaller ones. A stranger decides not to ask a question yet. A frightened woman decides to trust him for one more mile. Someone leaves food on a stove. Someone repairs a glove. Someone saves a letter because a name on it feels important. Someone comes down a porch instead of hiding behind a door. Someone shows up on a road when 6 riders appear. Someone reaches across a kitchen table and tells the truth. Those choices can look ordinary while they are happening. Sometimes, only years later, do people understand they were building a life. Caleb reached the porch. Claire held out her hand. He took it. "Everything put away?" she asked. "Everything." "The north gate?" "Closed. Horses fed." "Calf that thinks ice is a good idea. Still alive. Good." Caleb looked toward the fading mountains, then at her. Claire recognized the expression. "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing." "Caleb, I was thinking."
That seems dangerous.
"I was thinking I went to Silver Creek for flour." Claire smiled. "You did get flour." "I came home with more than I planned." "Do you want me to apologize?" "No." "Good. I wasn't going to." He stepped closer. Claire rested her hand against his chest. Inside the house was warm. Supper waited on the stove. A fresh note lay on the kitchen table reminding Caleb to repair the west gate hinge. He had already repaired it. He intended to leave the note there until morning anyway. Some things deserved an answer. Others deserved to remain for a while simply because the person who wrote them was there. Caleb kissed his wife. Then they went inside. And for the first time since Daniel had built the place, the Mercer house was no longer waiting for someone to fill it. It was full.